who knows what Abraham Lincoln sounded like? It's a very interesting choice that Daniel Day-Lewis makes. So interesting, where to pitch his voice. No one knew, of course, what Lincoln sounded like, but he makes these interesting choices based on, I guess, the stuff that he researches and reads, and I guess it lent itself to the image that we have, that Abraham Lincoln was this absolutely towering but extremely fair and gentle human being.
Hello and welcome to the Aspects of History podcast. My name is Oliver Webb-Carter and I'm the editor and your host. Now today is the first of my Aspects of History Film Club episodes, and my decision to start this series of bonus episodes on a monthly basis may well be a bad idea. In fact,
it's the worst plan since Abraham Lincoln said, "Oh, I'm sick of kicking around the house tonight. Let's go take in a show."
Yes, the film is Lincoln, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm going to be running these episodes with friend of the show, Director Tim Hewitt. So listeners, I do hope you can enjoy it. If you do or don't, you can let me know either through the Twitter or you can email me. Links are in the show notes. Next coming up is Argo, which will be released in March as a bonus. Both Tim and I think Lincoln is a great film, but it's not without its problems, so we discuss those. We also include 3 categories: most unlikely scene, greatest performance, and legacy. This discussion on Lincoln, whilst it probably has spoilers, I think it's safe to assume that most people know the Union won the Civil War against the Confederacy. And the film has been out for more than 10 years, so I'd say you can listen to this whether or not you've watched it. Coming up on the pod, I've got Ian Mortimer on the Middle Ages, John Sayles talking 18th century America and filmmaking, and Anthony Selden on walking the Western Front of World War I. I've also got James Ron discussing the aftermath of the death of Alexander the Great, the Wars of the Diadochi they're called. Now this may not be known to some of you, but it's such a fascinating period of ancient history. I really do hope you can join me for that. Please do subscribe to get these upcoming shows, and rate and review if you can. But in the meantime, I'll hand you over to me and Tim Hewitt discussing Lincoln. Tim Hewitt, welcome back to the podcast. But this is a new feature that I've introduced. It's the Aspects of History Film Club. And so in association with the director, Tim Hewitt, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me back.
Well, we had a good time talking about our top 10. So listeners, listeners, if you didn't catch that, you can go back and Tim's competes against my top 10. Mm-hmm. His do tend to come off a little bit better with technical know-how. So Tim had proposed 2 films for us to kick off the film club with, and the first of which is Lincoln, made in released in 2012, directed by the great Steven Spielberg, starring Daniel Day-Lewis and Sally Field, and a host of other great actors. Tim, you proposed this, and we're going to do another one as well, which will be coming out next month as a bonus podcast, dear listeners, which will be Argo, directed by Ben Affleck. But we were just saying as we hit record that these were both released in the same year, and I wondered if that was why you picked them, Tim.
Well, actually, yes, because, I mean, they really are very different, obviously, and completely different periods. But again, like we were talking about in our last podcast, when films like this compete at award ceremonies, how on earth do you decide which one's better? Essentially better. What is best film? Argo won that year, I think deservedly so. But I do think that Lincoln's a very interesting story, I think, the one that Steven Spielberg is telling, because originally, I believe it was Liam Neeson was cast as Lincoln, and it was originally going to be a lot more of his life, his lifespan. And as things went along, it was, I believe, Spielberg's first reading of the script that was sent to him was something like 500 pages long. And, it was just too much for a film. So they cut it down to his struggle to pass the anti-slavery amendment. And I think that's when Liam Neeson dropped out, actually.
Did he drop out because it was about the change of the script, or he just...
Yeah, I think he wanted to do
what do they
more
call
of
it?
his life.
Not scheduling clash.
They probably did, to be honest, because of the delays, and they probably said, well, now he's not available. But I actually don't know really the ins and outs of it. But then I think Daniel Day-Lewis had turned it down, as he usually does. I think he turns down pretty much everything.
Is this in one of his retirement phases?
Wasn't his whole career in one of his retirement phases? I think he has retired for good now, but who knows? Yeah, so I think, and so that they whittled it down to concentrate on just this period, which I think is better, because biopics can, tend to follow the same formula, particularly historical biopics. There's always the rise and fall. There's always the same beats in the story that you kind of get with pretty much anyone's life story. So I thought this was much more interesting. I don't think it's without its flaws. But I think it is a fantastic piece of filmmaking, and he's a very interesting character. I think
he certainly is. Abraham Lincoln's a fascinating character, and I think this book was based on a history book called The Team of Rivals. Which is a long one. It's nearly 1,000 pages, so I can see why the script was originally quite a long one. But I think she was the author, Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Yes, was on hand quite a bit, and I think Spielberg got the rights, the film rights to it very early. I just think, and I think the book is a lot longer. It covers a lot more, obviously, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it was such a pivotal period of his presidency that I think it was, the right thing to do, to concentrate on something that's so prevalent and so timeless. And
because Lincoln is known as, of course, the president who was assassinated, Civil War, slavery, and the 13th Amendment really does get to the heart of it.
Absolutely. And what an array of characters in the film, and really fascinating, and how they went about trying to get the votes. Something I didn't know about, really, the detail. And
I think it's a really good picture, showing of the sort of horse trading and the machinations that go on behind the scenes, which I'm sure happen in most, if not all, democracies. There's that famous saying is that it's lawmaking is like sausage making. You just don't want to see what happens,
what goes into them. I agree. And I mean, it's an amazing recreation of the period as well. Who knows what Abraham Lincoln sounded like? It's a very interesting choice that Daniel Day-Lewis makes, as all his choices, I think, are. I will preface that, in fact, with it was a very good year, I think, that year for film. I think Argo was an amazing piece of filmmaking. I find it a little odd that Ben Affleck wasn't nominated for Best Director, however. My theory is that his name was on the table and someone nudged it with their elbow and it fell in the bin accidentally and no one realized.
It was alphabetical.
Now, maybe. But I mean, Argo won Best Picture, but it didn't even get nominated for Best Director. And I think that's one of its strengths. But Lincoln, was I think was a great piece of storytelling. However, I may be one of the few people who disagree with the fact that Daniel Day-Lewis won Best Actor, because there was one other performance that year that I thought was tremendous and should have won. And that was Joaquin Phoenix in a film called The Master. And I think Daniel Day-Lewis is fantastic. And I think he deservedly has won 2 out of his 3 Oscars. But his choices are so interesting, where to pitch his voice. No one knew, of course, what Lincoln sounded like, but he makes these interesting choices based on, I guess, the stuff that he researches and reads. And I guess it lent itself to the image that we have, that Abraham Lincoln was this absolutely towering but extremely fair and gentle human being.
Well, you mentioned that we don't know what his voice sounded like. I mean, you're right, there aren't any recordings, but I think that the slight high-pitched nature of it is mentioned in historical record, and then also his gait, the way he walked, like a sort of lanky sort of dinosaur.
Absolutely, which I think Day-Lewis captures quite brilliantly, the way he holds his arms, the way he even takes that very iconic hat off and on. And I think he had something done to his ears to make them stick out a little bit more like Abraham Lincoln, because I'm pretty sure that Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't have ears like he does in Lincoln. So, it
wouldn't surprise me. There is nothing that Day-Lewis won't do.
No. I mean, he insisted on the entire cast and crew calling him Mr. President.
Isn't that just
on and off?
Isn't that boring? Oh, he's like,
I don't know. It depends how far you. I've seen him. I've seen in interviews with him where he's like, I can't. If I'm not convinced, then I just feel like I won't be able to convince anyone else. So if he just doesn't feel comfortable and it's not working for him, then I guess you can argue, yeah, okay. But at the same time, it is all make believe that this, it's not documentary stuff, and it's not. So I don't know. It's kind of like a little. I can see it both ways, but sometimes it feels like it gets a little bit excessive.
He does take life a little bit too seriously.
Yeah.
I think.
But look what he's done. He's given us great performances. Yeah.
The Boxer. I think I love him in The Boxer. I got ignored by the Oscars, and we're about to have a speaking around about the time when the Oscars are about to be announced, or we've had the nominations. I don't know when they're due out.
Yeah. I think it's March sometime. Yeah.
So we should. I just want to briefly mention the Oscars, and then we'll kick off with the film. And
sure.
I think the Oscars now almost entirely devalued.
I don't know.
They don't get the ratings, and look at the nominations. The list is getting longer and longer each year. They nominated Maverick, the Tom Cruise film, which I don't think the first Top Gun film would have been nominated.
No, I think that would have been a real stretch in those days. I mean, I think it's been nominated for film and screenplay, which is very interesting. But then again, why not? Why, all that they don't tend to nominate the big blockbusters for things like screenplay and sometimes picture, yes, but the it's very subjective. But I really liked the Maverick, to be honest. I didn't expect it to get nominated for a best screenplay Oscar, or even an Oscar, to be honest. But it's difficult. They've always said what determines someone worthy of being nominated for an Oscar. Does it have to be a serious role? Does it have to be a serious film? Why can't slapstick comedy ever get nominated for Oscars? So I don't know. It's a strange role. I don't find them as the Oscars these days as attractive as I did when I was much younger, like in the 90s, when Billy Crystal and Whoopi Goldberg were presenting them, and in our country, Barry Norman was always introducing them and stuff. I always felt it was a little bit more glitzy and attractive, and I don't know. It's become a little. I don't stay up, let's say, nowadays all night to watch them anymore.
Now, I'm going to do a shameless name drop here, but the listeners will be in it because this will be a podcast coming out. I think it's going to come out in the first Saturday in March. I was interviewing an Oscar-nominated director and writer, John Sayles.
Oh, fantastic. John Sayles. Yeah, great.
I love his films, and he's a wonderful, lovely man, and he's just written a historical novel. So there's the only relevance to this conversation is that he's a filmmaker and he's been Oscar nominated, but I thought I would do that shamelessly to impress Director Tim.
Well, he made one of the great sort of indie modern westerns, a film called Lone Star, which with Matthew McConaughey and Chris Christopherson
and Chris Cooper.
And Chris Cooper, yeah. And it's in two periods. I think, is it the 50s and the present day in Texas? And it is, if anyone's listening who hasn't seen it, it is a great film. Matthew McConaughey in a very early role and a very serious role for his rom-com spree. Great film. Well, it's great that you interviewed him. That's fantastic.
Lovely man.
Wow.
So there's a little trail for the listeners there. Right. So the film itself, so it opens with, I think we're just seeing the conclusion of a battle, and Lincoln is sitting under a canopy, and a succession of, he starts off with some African American soldiers speak to him, one of whom, David Oyelowo, is one of the African American soldiers, and then you get two white European Union soldiers as well. I don't think it starts that well, because it seems like the entire Union Army has memorized the Gettysburg Address.
Yes, I mean, to the point where it's like it's as if it's been taught in school, and they've known since they were children how, I mean, the way the fluency in which they recite it is I understand what you mean. It's a little bit, it's sort of, I think that's quite Steven Spielbergian.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I don't necessarily condemn him for this, because the Gettysburg Address is so brilliant and so incredible, and in only 270 odd words.
Yeah.
And I love it also because it has echoes of the Pericles' funeral oration from the Peloponnesian War in the 5th century BC. So it is hugely powerful, and I think recently, due to recent political developments in America, it perhaps has had its power slightly diluted, which is a sad thing, because the words are just
shame.
But the words are just so simple, beautifully powerful, that as
agree.
an American, I'd cheerfully memorize it. But anyway, I wanted to mention that about the Gettysburg Address. It's a really important speech.
I mean, I think the opening visually is interesting, because it's the only part of the film of that kind, of that style, quite brutal. I mean, it's quite brutal, the fighting within the battle that you see in the mud at the beginning, to the point where some of it looks so real, and them kicking these heads below the waterline, and it's just and you think, oh my God, what kind of a film am I in for here? And then suddenly, after that, it's nothing but talking, and it's, as I think Steven Spielberg said, it's the talkiest film he's ever made. And he said it's really a film that I took a back seat on, and the script is really at the forefront of it all, and the performances. But yeah, it's interesting that he sort of takes you down he slightly leads you down the garden path, and then swings in another direction. I just think the design of the film is amazing. The detail in the period is quite astonishing. He has his usual costume designer and production designer, I think, who just create such a first-hand feel of the place, of everywhere they go. The House of Representatives, I mean, I'm pretty sure that was a set, and I think it's pretty astonishing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, even the streets, which are muddy and dark with all the manure, presumably. Yeah, it's very good. But so with the way the story gets going is that this is really Lincoln intending to emancipate the slaves, and there's a scene I wanted to talk about where he is in with his cabinet, and he explains the intricacies of his earlier presidential declaration, I think it was, where he essentially emancipated the slaves. Yeah. But it was a as I mentioned, a presidential order. So constitutionally was problematic, and he explains this brilliantly in a sort of 2 or 3 minute explanation. And it really does get to the heart of the Civil War, I think, because the Civil War, I mean, it's interesting. You speak to certainly people in the South. Yeah, they would argue that the Civil War was about states' rights. Some would, or that it was also, others would describe it as the War of Northern Aggression. My brother-in-law is from Alabama, and really? Yes, he has described.
Is that what he would describe it as?
Well, I think he is saying that tongue in cheek, to be clear. Right. But it does go to the heart of the problem. I mean, we all know the war was about slavery. So even if it were about states' rights, it was about the states' rights to enslave its population.
Yeah, well, I found it really interesting that they kept also trying to enforce the point that they were a different country. and that they kept having to be reminded, no, we're all citizens of the same country, and you're a rebellion. And the fact that no other nation on earth recognized the Confederacy as a country in itself. But I find it interesting whether they actually believed that, or they were simply trying to make a point.
I think they did. I think they did. Yeah, absolutely. They were viewing themselves as a separate country. They believe that very strongly. I think, but I think that goes to the heart of it, because the Union viewed them as very much part of
the United States.
Yeah, and so they viewed them as traitors. You know, I should point out, I've got lots of listeners, and I know because my map tells me I've got lots of listeners in America, and I'm really hoping they're not all pulling their hair out, screaming at their
iPhones.
These two Brits.
Who the hell are these British people that think that they can? Yeah, no, it's true. Or who the hell does this British person think he can play one of our greatest Americans?
But I don't want to linger too long on the whys and the wherefores of the Civil War. Other than that, the description by Daniel Day-Lewis in that cabinet scene is really powerful, where he explains the trouble with the Constitution, which obviously was written by the Founding Fathers, or more particularly Thomas Jefferson, and slavery was essentially parked until the Civil War resolved it.
Here is the scene. We're 30 minutes in, and Lincoln is talking to his cabinet.
I decided the Constitution gives me war powers. No one knows just exactly what those powers are. Some say they don't exist. I don't know. I decided I needed them to exist to uphold my oath to protect the Constitution, which I decided meant that I could take the rebels' slaves from them as property confiscated in war. That might recommend a suspicion that I agree with the Rebs that their slaves are property in the first place. Of course, I don't. Never have. Glad to see any man free, and if calling a man property or war contraband does the trick, why, I caught at the opportunity. Now, here's where it gets truly slippery. I use the law allowing for the seizure of property in a war, knowing it applies only to the property of governments and citizens of belligerent nations, but the South ain't a nation. That's why I can't negotiate with them. So, if in fact the Negroes are property according to law, have I the right to take the rebels' property from them if I insist they're rebels only and not citizens of a belligerent country? And slipperier still, I maintain it ain't our actual southern states in rebellion, but only the rebels living in those states, the laws of which states remain in force. The laws of which states remain in force. That means that since it's states' laws that determine whether Negroes can be sold as slaves, as property, the federal government doesn't have a say in that, at least not yet. Then Negroes in those states are slaves, hence property, hence my war powers allow me to confiscate them as such, so I confiscate them. But if I'm a respecter of states' laws, how then can I legally free them with my proclamation as I done? Unless I'm canceling states' laws. I felt the war demanded it. My oath demanded it. I felt right with myself, and I hoped it was legal to do it. I'm hoping still. 2 years ago, I proclaimed these people emancipated, then, thenceforward, and forever free. Well, let's say the courts decide I had no authority to do it. They might well decide that. Say there's no amendment abolishing slavery. Says after the war, and I can no longer use my war powers to just ignore the court's decisions like I sometimes felt I had to do. Might those people I freed be ordered back into slavery? That's why I'd like to get the 13th Amendment through the House and on its way to ratification by the states, wrap the whole slavery thing up forever and aye as soon as I'm able, now, end of this month. And I'd like you to stand behind me, like my cabinet's most always done.
I just thought that scene was really, really...
Yeah, so I thought it was, and it was very succinct for a very talky film. The one thing that you do obviously realize about Lincoln, in this film anyway, is that he really liked to tell stories and actually talk quite quite a bit. Everything was, slightly humorously done. Daniel Day-Lewis always does something with a smile in the corner of his mouth, or tells stories with a smile in the corner of his mouth. In fact, I think maybe you could argue, one of the characters actually says in the film, "I will not listen to another one of your stories." And this is, I think, kind of helps the perception that we have that he was such a lovely family man. I do have one slight criticism of Abraham Lincoln as a president, so please excuse me, listeners in America, but I found a quote that it was at a meeting, it was at the White House, and he was addressing the leaders of the Native Americans. And this is something that I feel that, is never kind of mentioned when he's revered as, he abolished slavery, the Civil War was won, etc., etc. And I found it a very interesting quote. This is sort of slightly parenthetical to what we're talking about, but I have it here, and it struck me as quite surprising. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of how exactly he was trying to help the Native Americans, if at all. I don't know, but this is a quote: Abraham Lincoln's speech to Native American leaders in the White House on March 1863. "I'm really not capable of advising you whether, in the providence of the Great Spirit, who is the great father of us all, it is best for you to maintain the habits and customs of your race, or to adopt a new mode of life. I can only say that I can see no way in which your race is to become as numerous and as prosperous as the white race, except by living as they do." And I find that quite, I know nothing about his outlook, his perception of the Native Americans, but considering his undying effort to get this amendment passed and win the Civil War and get rid of slavery, I find it really surprising that he didn't match that passion, the situation with the Native Americans at the time.
Yes, well, that certainly the Native Americans, once the Civil War is over and under Ulysses S. Grant, ultimately the destruction of the Native Americans happens in due course. But I may be wrong here, but I think he didn't take the same stance as all men are equal or born equal. I kind of want to say, except for the Native Americans. Well, it's difficult because the Native Americans didn't want to be part of the United States. They didn't want to take part in democracy.
It sort of marginalized them even more, and it kind of...
His approach to slavery it evolved. I think he was always against it, but he was a pragmatist as well. So at the outbreak of war, I think he find him saying, "I want to preserve the Union. If that means we have slavery, but the Union is preserved, then I'd rather preserve the Union." I think his view changed over the course of the war. And so who's to say that his view on the Native Americans wouldn't have changed as well? And it's always very difficult when you pluck a sentence or two from that might well have been part of a huge long...
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Who's to say? Talking about the film now, obviously we went off on a bit of a tangent. Sorry about that. I also have one slight criticism of I think everybody in it, by the way. I think James Spader steals the film.
Yeah, he's got a great part. He's got a great part.
It's a fantastic part. It's the character so well defined. I do have a slight issue. I find the scenes between Lincoln and his wife, and particularly coming from Sally Field, who I love, by the way. I've loved her ever since Smokey and the Bandit. But
at least she didn't say "not without my daughter."
No,
would upset my wife.
I really
who will be mentioned in the next film talking about Iran. Anyway.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. I find Sally Field's performance a little bit theatrical, a little bit like I am at the theatre watching two actors on stage. It's I don't want to say forced, but
well, at one point she says, "You're not going to put me in a mental institution again," which he did.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
I
indeed,
don't.
that's sad.
I'm not saying that in the context of her behaving
Performance.
theatrically to suggest that she should have been put in a mental
No.
institution. I'm not suggesting that for a
Absolutely
moment,
not.
dear listeners. All I'm saying is that perhaps this is rather a clumsy way of showing a bit of mental illness.
Perhaps the thing is that everybody in the film, I think, gives quite realistic, naturalistic performances. Even the bigger, slightly more but like James Spader, for example, is slightly more flamboyant, but they're all very much rooted in reality. They don't concentrate on traits of the period, even though there is obviously some slightly archaic dialogue. But I mean, I think the dialogue is very natural as well. But there's something about Sally Field's performance that just sort of edges on the slightly too.
She's dealing with the loss of a child, isn't she? So, I don't.
Yes.
Part of our film club, I had these categories talk about, and one of the categories was most unlikely, given that we're talking about historical films. So it sounds like you've just mentioned Mrs. Lincoln seems very unlikely. So
let's just emphasize just ever so slightly the performance. That's what I was referring to. Obviously, not the actual human. Real being.
The other thing I found I was a bit unsure about was the vice president of the Confederacy when he appears to negotiate with Lincoln and his Secretary of State Seward. The vice president of the Confederacy,
Jackie Earl Haley. He's a great actor.
He plays
Alexander Stevens.
Yeah. And he's terribly polite to the African American troops. I found that scene a bit. I wonder if the Union Army, if Grant would have sent a detachment of African American troops to collect the Confederate.
Well, unless they were unless
there's no reason why they shouldn't. But
but I think maybe they were trying to make a point as well. Yeah. And I mean, I remember the scene where they pull up, and I think all the African Americans are on their horses. And the Confederates pull up, and basically every single one of the Confederates, except for Stevens, glares. There's an absolutely undisguisable glare, a menacing glare that they give every one of the African Americans, except for Stevens. I think he says something like "much obliged."
Yes.
To them. Who knows? Yeah, maybe it is a bit unlikely.
Another category is best performance. Now it's
I've mentioned one, but.
James Spader. It's got to be Day-Lewis. Otherwise, why did everyone on the set have to call him Mr. President the whole time? That would have been for nothing if he didn't then win the Aspects of History Film Club Best Performance.
Right. I see. Okay, that's interesting. So, are we going with his method or what we genuinely think as the best performance in the film?
What we genuinely.
I mean, the thing is, it's actually quite a hot topic with me because I absolutely love. I think the best pieces of drama, whether it be theatre, whether it be television, whether it be film, my favorite form is when there's it's great ensemble acting. I much prefer that to one towering performance that carries a film. When someone asks who's your favorite performance, like the guys who are on the opposition, who are pro-slavery, I just think we've all brilliant.
Tommy Lee Jones, yes, who plays.
Tommy Lee Jones is always great. He never really does put a foot wrong, and he really is very good in this. I mean, he's hysterically funny in some scenes.
Thaddeus Stevens, one of the radicals. Yeah, he's fantastic. I'm wondering who you think is also very good.
Yeah, the House of Representatives scenes when they're debating. See, everybody's very good in the film.
They've got Walton Goggins in there. I love.
Oh, who's a great actor. So, I mean, I probably would go with James Spader, but simply because I love James Spader in pretty much everything he does, and I just love this character in this. But I understand if we're going to get a lot of stick for not giving it to Daniel Day-Lewis.
I'm going to go with Daniel Day-Lewis because of the voice and the gaits and the number of lines he had to learn. Probably.
Well, that's what actors do, though. That's not as challenging as Hamlet, for example.
James Spader, I think his best role was in Mannequin. He plays the slime.
Mannequin, and he was very good in an indie film called Secretary with Maggie Gyllenhaal.
That's very good.
And Sex Lies Videotape, and a great David Cronenberg film called Crash. Yeah. So you go Daniel Day-Lewis and so Daniel Day-Lewis, fine.
Okay, so we've gone most inaccurate scene. I think we've gone with the opening scene, have we? With the
You mean when they recite the Gettysburg Address to him?
Yes.
Yeah. And the thing is, can I just add to that bit? When he's reciting it to him, and I think he takes over from his colleague, and then as he's reciting it, he just turns around and walks away. And just walks away from Lincoln. And it's like, well, I get it. It's dramatic. But I think you'd maybe just stay and say, thank you very much, Mr. President, for talking to me. Yeah. So I agree with that, by the way. Yeah. Good call.
Now, the other category I've got on this is its legacy, the film's legacy. Now, I think it's rather sank without a trace.
I agree. I think it hasn't sunk without a trace as much as what I think is a very underrated Steven Spielberg film, which is, and I know you like the documentary about the subject, Munich. I think that's a film that the more you watch it, if you can, just watch it more than once, the third time and then the fourth, it gets better and better. And you realize, wow, this is a great film. I actually think I argue the same thing about Minority Report. I think it's another one of his most underrated films. I don't know how this is going to, I mean, this is 11 years old now, Lincoln. And to me, it's a bit odd because I feel like it's only like 3 or 4, but it has sort of sunk without a trace, regardless of its accolade. And the fact that Daniel Day-Lewis won, the importance of the subject matter is, I don't know, it's odd. No one really mentions it when they go, what are great Steven Spielberg films? I mean, maybe it's not a great Steven Spielberg film to most people.
Well, I thought it was really good because I enjoy watching the mechanics and the parts of government and how it works.
I agree.
But
Absolutely.
I don't think it makes particularly good cinema.
It depends what your definition of cinema is, I suppose. I mean, maybe
entertainment. What I'm saying is, I think I'm unusual in that I like watching politicians sort of.
So do I. I mean, one of the greatest television series ever made is The West Wing, and it's a lot of people talking about politics and policies, bills, all sorts of things. And why is it interesting? Lincoln should be boring if you think about it. It should be terribly dull. But it's not. I think if I were to say anything about it, I would literally just take out the husband and wife scenes because I think they slow it down. Yeah, we get that he's a family man and that he's a lovely father, and we get it. But we get that he's a decent person through all the politics scenes.
So you would remove the only female presence in the entire.
That's a really awful thing to say. No, I wouldn't.
There is the maid as well. Would you keep the maid or would you get rid of her?
I would definitely keep the maid. I would.
So the only female presence would be an African-American maid. You're happy with your choice there?
This is why I think maybe, and this is literally a point I was about to make when you were talking about not good cinema. I was thinking maybe it would have, if it had stayed in its original form, that as in the whole life of Lincoln. Well, I don't know whether it was the whole life, but the 500-page script that was originally written, maybe it would have made a very interesting TV series. And so we could have, you could have a hell of a lot more characters.
There is something missed out. I think that there are some historians who argue that the driver behind changing the Constitution and the addition of the 13th Amendment for the abolition of slavery was actually from a female political group in the north of America. And so
that's interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, that I would have found that very interesting indeed. I mean, it's a very radical thing to say, but the fact is that, Sally Field is really the only female character with any substance. But of course, that goes to show it's reflecting the period of time where they.
The maid is very powerful. I think she doesn't have many scenes, but she is very important.
Her presence is very powerful because she sits up in the gallery in the house, doesn't she, and watches a hell of a lot.
Played by Gloria Reuben, of course. And it's revealed that she is a former slave who had been beaten.
I found it to be quite cinematic, to be honest. I mean, visually everything. It's, even though it is it's written by a playwright. So you can sort of see the style where he's coming from. But I found it to be very cinematic. Why I mean, I don't know whether it's sunk without a trace, but no one really I don't really talk about it with anyone, or at least no one's talked about it with me.
If one thinks of a Civil War film, I would think of Glory.
Oh yeah, well it's iconic. It's not a subject matter that's been, has it been dealt with like?
I don't know if you've seen Cold Mountain.
Oh, the Anthony Minghella film, yeah.
Yeah, which is from the Confederate side, and actually there's a hugely powerful opening scene where, forget the battle, when a mining operation by the Union side goes wrong and they blow up a huge amount of earth.
So I remember now.
But it blocks them off, and so the troops who are charge in are then it's a dead end, and they are fired upon, sort of turkey shoot, thousands slaughtered.
Isn't it also touched upon in, I think, one of we both think this is one of the greatest films ever made, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
It is, but I don't.
But not really in any meaningful way. It's just like a plot device, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you couldn't call it a Civil War film.
No. But the thing is, I mean, this is a Civil War film without any war. Except for the opening scene, there is literally you do not see any battles or I mean, you see Ulysses S. Grant kind of
Jared Harris, who I love.
Jared Harris, yeah, amazing actor. Yeah,
Jared Harris sounds exactly like his father, Richard Harris. He also, I don't know if you're aware, has got previous in playing historical characters set in America, because he is in The Last of the Mohicans.
Yes, he is. Absolutely right.
He plays a very small part as a junior officer.
However, the most surprising small role he did in his early career is no one will know it. I don't think anyone will ever know it's Jared Harris. But he's in a brief moment in Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers, where Mickey and Mallory Knox, the leads, the serial killers, are now extremely famous around the world, and you get news clips from all around the world, and then you see a clip of Jared Harris in London, and he basically says to camera as a Cockney, yeah, you got Dylan, you got JFK, and you got Mickey and Mallory Knox, and that's Jared Harris as a very young guy, very young actor.
I thought I had got you over The Last of the Mohicans, but
Trump.
He's very good. He's actually also very good. I just want to mention Jared Harris again. I'm a big fan of his. He's very good in the Terror, which is the first series of The Terror, which he plays a ship's captain on the search for the Northwest Passage. It's got Kieran Hines as well.
Oh yes, I've seen it. Yes, of course. And they get stuck in the ice.
They do. Anyway, so legacy, then I don't think it's got much of a legacy, this film. I really don't.
No, it's a shame, because my favorite bits of the film are when they're debating, or scenes with Tommy Lee Jones berating someone when they come into his office. But I mean, of course, we know the outcome, but the journey is interesting. I do think it's an interesting, as you say, in the in and outs of politics and how things are done and blah, blah, blah. I mean, people may disagree with us, of course, and may say that, no, what are you talking about? This is a monumental landmark film.
But I agree it is, but I just don't think many other people think that.
But I mean, popular, you mean? It may be because of the format. You said, is it particularly cinematic for most people? I don't know.
As you say, it works for The West Wing. Although I watched The West Wing again, and I don't think it stands up to too many other viewings. Everything goes right for them.
They're always right.
And when they've got a difficult Republican opponent, he's basically a Democrat. Alan Alda.
Yeah, it's true. Yes, exactly. Who I think at the end becomes an advisor.
Exactly.
To the new Democratic president.
Can you imagine Trump going, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna down my weapons. I'm gonna help Joe Biden now. Let's think of the way we can resolve the problems that the country has."
No, but I like dipping in and out of The West Wing. I do find it comforting. I find it like a little bit like revisiting Friends. It becomes bigger. It becomes a little bit more. Schmaltzy, if I could say that. Yeah. So I don't know. Lincoln, good film, very good, interesting character.
Yeah, well, I hope this inspires those of you who haven't seen it and who are listening. I do recommend watching it. It is a really, really powerful film, but it's sad that I don't think it has had the impact that perhaps Spielberg intended. Well, Tim, thank you. We are going to talk about Argo for our next club, but we'll sign off on those three categories. So the most inaccurate scene was the recitation of the Gettysburg Address by the entire Union Army. Best performance, Daniel Day-Lewis, and legacy, not so much. Thanks,
Excellent.
Tim.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. It's great and humbling to have so many new listeners join, and I really do hope you enjoyed our first film club. Links are in the show notes if you'd like to get in touch. I'd be very keen to hear your views. Next in the club is Argo, directed by Ben Affleck, and with the recent developments in Iran, it's something both Tim and I were very keen to discuss. As I mentioned at the start, there's plenty of great history coming up, but until then, thank you and good night.